And this is the question that I'm also posing to our panelists. What eventuality are we preparing for in light of climate change in Africa? We know that of the 10 countries that are affected by consequences of climate change, 7 of them are in Africa. We've experienced floods in the last 25 years. We've experienced drought. I mean, I can even give the example of Cape Town in South Africa, where we almost reached day 0. So as everyone is talking about, the notion of Africa being the next breadbasket, and as someone who's in agriculture full-time, I know I may not look like a farmer today, but I am a farmer, and I'm trying to get as many young people like myself under 30 into farming because because we believe that Africa is going to be the next breadbasket of the world. So how do we come up, how do we provide solutions to some of the challenges that we have regarding climate change? And so I have with me Ms. Patricia Masikati. She's from World Agronomy Center. She's a systems scientist. And I have Mr. Maxwell. He actually told me to call him Max. So I have Max Gomera. He's a UN director of UN Environment. And I have Ms. Dr. Retabile Molamu. She's a manager at the Innovation Hub under the Green Economy. So Ms. Retabile, what is your next, I guess?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I think our next for the country and the continent is to ensure that, on the one hand, to mitigate against the impacts of climate change. And mitigation would mean that we begin to be as resource efficient as we can with what we have. But also there is a need to adapt. And some part of the adaptation talks to ensuring that we have alarm systems in place. For instance, disasters will be more recurring into the future. How do we ensure that we use our science institutions to ensure that we have systems in place that warn us against disaster when disasters do come? So we can do a lot around making sure that we mitigate, but also adaptation. And those are just a few examples. There's a lot. And the water case that you mentioned in Cape Town is going to be a real one for into the future. In fact, I always say that Cape Town was able to market their water crisis a lot more than the rest of the country, because Cape Town was not the only one that was experiencing a drought. The Northwest in the South African context was also in drought. In fact, if people in Gauteng could remember, just 3 years ago, we're almost where Cape Town was. But what that has done is it has helped the city and the province to come up with interventions. And these interventions are not just short-term interventions. They've become more water efficient, but they have also identified other sources of water that will sustain into the future. And others are cheaper, others are more expensive, such as the desalination. But suffice to say that we need to do things differently. It can't be business as usual anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit about your work at the Innovation Hub?
Yeah, so I work for the Gauteng province. I work for an innovation agency of the Gauteng province. It's called the Innovation Hub. The Innovation Hub focuses on 3 broad sectors. If you consider the work that we're doing, we very much cut across all the 17 SDGs. But I come from a unit called the Green Economy, and within that unit we do 2 key activities. The first one is to develop policies and strategies for the province, but also to provide technical support to local government. In South Africa, I think there's always a blurry line on the role that provincial entities or state entities should play. Incidentally, the constitutional mandate, one of the constitutional mandate of the provincial level of government is for us as provinces to provide technical support to municipalities. So that is one component. But another exciting component of our work is supporting innovative climate solutions. In particular, we're supporting startups that come up with solutions in agro-processing, in water, in energy. And this program, the Climate Innovation Center, is an initiative of the World Bank, although they don't give South Africa the actual money because we're a third world country. But what I'd like to point out is that this is a global initiative. There are 3 CICs in sub-Saharan Africa. We have our counterparts in Ghana. There's a Ghana CIC. There's also the Kenyan CIC, which is the first one to be established. And we have others around the world. And so there our preoccupation is to support these startups that have innovative climate solutions, first to commercialize their businesses, and the next stage is then to scale. And we have great stories in our portfolio of what that structured support, the tech development support has been able to achieve in terms of job creation, but also in terms of leveraging funding from the developmental banks. So yeah, that's what we do.
Okay, thank you. Max, what steps are you taking at the UN environment to mitigate some of the challenges that we have?
Good.
And what exactly are you doing there?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for that. And I'll pick up on that question together with the question that Tsitsi asked in the morning, because I think it's a very important metaphor, if you like, for where we are in the stage of our life today. When she asked, what are you preparing for? And I would say that as the United Nations and as me, as one of the staff members, we are preparing really for an eventuality when our natural systems, the systems that power our life, are no longer able to do so. They will have collapsed.
Right.
Now, I'm not talking about the end of humanity here. We are preparing to make sure that you and I take these necessary steps to make sure that we don't reach that stage. Now, listening to the conversations that have happened so far, many people in this room have achieved goals that have transformed lives and have created legacies. You are delivering education to the next leaders in Africa. You've built hospitals that are saving lives. You've delivered broadband to many people in Africa who need it. In fact, Africa is strong today because you are strong. And that is good.
Yeah.
But today I would like to have a conversation here with the panel and with yourselves about some of the people who are in the eye of the climate change storm. And these are people who we all care about and we talk about them all the time. And they are facing the brunt of climate change. And as part of that conversation, I would like to talk to you as well about Africa's forgotten assets. And those are the assets that sustain our lives. Those are the wildlife and the forests that we all care about. And they are under serious threat right now. Yeah. Now, I grew up in a small town in Zimbabwe. It's called Kadoma. And like many people my age, during the school holidays, my parents would ship me to the rural areas. I became a cattle header or a goat header. Now, I loved it because during that time in the rural areas, I learned many of the life skills that are helping me today in my life. I learned how to fish. I learned how to farm. I even learned how to talk to a girl in that community. It was a community that gave us most of the life skills that we had. And that was good. But now, what has happened is when I go back to Mondoro, I hardly recognize the place that I grew up in. It has changed. The lush green vegetation that I used to see is now replaced by endless stretches of croplands that are dry. What I used to enjoy as a young person when I went to the village was that we would go into the village and the village would be able to provide. So many people from the city would go into the village, they would come back with their hands full because the village was able to provide. Right now, when I visit Mondoro, I have to take my food with me. Sometimes take bottled water to Mondoro. what was poignant about my visits to Mondoro in those days was that farming was thriving, and the village was able to sustain itself. That is no longer the case. Now, in my adult life today, as a staff member of the United Nations, I've learned that the story of Mondoro is not at all an isolated story. I find it in Motomo in Kenya. I find it in Gorongosa in Mozambique. I find it all across Africa. And what has happened is that in our quest to produce food for ourselves, we are increasingly encroaching into those forests and lands that sustain ourselves. And climate change has not helped. It has quickened that process. What I'm finding is that villagers are no longer able to produce food for themselves. In fact, African agriculture, it is at about 20% of the productivity of global agriculture. Think about it, 20%. What that has done is our ability to look at ourselves has been seriously undermined. But I've also learned that this is not an inevitable outcome of the choices that we are making. We can change that trajectory. And that's the conversation that I hope we can engage with you as philanthropists, but with the expertise around here.
Yeah. So, Ms. Patricia, what steps can we collectively take to increase awareness? Because communicating that to people in rural Africa who still don't really understand the impact of climate change, they can see that something has changed. I mean, we work with farmers as well in deep rural Kalahari on the side of South Africa. And some of them will tell you that, years ago, they used to plant, in these areas, they used to have water. Now the wells have dried up. So how do you communicate the changes to people that are at the bottom of the pyramid?
Yeah, it's a challenge to us, even researchers, to understand or integrate some of this information that's required for us to understand the impacts of climate change. But we're still for farmers, for example, but not undermining their intelligence. Most of them, they are very smart. For example, if you look at how farmers live, most of us researchers, we can major in agronomy, for example, maize production, sorghum production. But farmers, they live in an integrated, in a system. And with that system, it's them who actually, they are working on these different components that us researchers come in and work in as individuals. But for them, they've been integrating these systems. In the past, for example, we could see how some of them were coping. For example, when we look at the shift in cultivation, which they were doing before, it was to cope with maybe soil degradation. But now it's no longer the issue. So what is it that we can do to assist farmers, for example, to understand that, for example, these days you need more sedentary lives rather than the nomadic one, which they used to have. It's up to us researchers. And what I've seen is that we've always been having challenges in communicating this to the farmers, because there are so many voices out there which are talking to one person. For example, we go in, talk of livestock, talk of trees, talk of the crops. What is it that we can do to go in with one voice which is harmonized and talk to our farmers and other development agencies for them to understand? For example, if you look at cover, what's the importance of cover? Someone might just go and cut trees, or someone might start doing conservation agriculture on their farm. But what is the importance of having a tree, of having conservation agriculture, of having clean water systems, of having proper nutrition, and things like that? That kind of information, it's being brought in bits and pieces by us, and it's important for us to go down to the farmers and make them understand. The other thing is also not just to look at, for example, we mostly concentrate on, when we look at agriculture, it's just crop production. When we look at most of us here, we earn salaries. on a monthly basis. But for farmers, for example, most of them, they just produce once an annual crop, and then they harvest, and then they get their paycheck, which is mostly very thin, and then they cannot reinvest. So it will be important for us, we were just talking over lunch, to say in the past, farmers would have like diverse portfolios of food, of income, and nutrition, which is no longer there. So now what's important is to promote these portfolios so that farmers can have income and food and nutrition over the year, instead of just having maybe one particular component which they can feed on.
Yeah. No, thank you. Dr. Aratabile, do you think Africa can become a global leader in challenging some, climate change and coming up with solution while, maintaining economic growth?
I definitely think so, and I'm saying so because I get to work with people that are coming up with solutions every day. And one of the advantages of Africans coming up with their solution is that they understand the context. I think in the previous panel, one of the speakers talked to possibly adopting or importing some of the technologies abroad. And I totally agree that there is value in that. But there would be a need for us to adapt some of those solutions that come from outside to context. Because something that works in Germany might not work as it does in Germany in the African context. So on the one hand, there's lots of these technologies that are on the shelf. We're at least 10 years behind in terms of high-tech R&D as a continent, specifically as South Africa. So we can exploit that, we can import those technologies. But we are the ones who will be able to adapt them to context because we understand the context. The second one is innovation or coming up with creative ways of dealing with climate solution doesn't have to be high tech.
Right.
We have examples of people that have come up with creative solution. For instance, we have a company that is treating water using macadamia seeds. They're able to grind it, and it's a microfiltration. African solution. We didn't pick it up from anywhere, and we've seen a lot of that. Solutions such as integrating various water-saving technologies. We've seen that. So I definitely think, particularly in the areas of agriculture and agro-processing, we understand what we need. Incidentally, let me give you some anecdotal information. It's predicted that by 2050, 25% of the population, the global population, will be in Africa. Of the 10 countries, to your point that 8 of the 10 countries that will be adversely affected by climate change will be in Africa. 5 of the countries that will experience the highest population growth will be in Africa. What does that mean? It means that we need to be able to produce food for all these people that are going to be there, especially young people, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to be creative around how we do agriculture. And with the experience like Mondoro, where things are not as they were, we would have to come up with creative solutions on how to tackle that. By 2050, we need to increase up our capacity, it's one of the UN studies, by 100%. And with the land that's deteriorating, we need to be extremely creative to ensure that we double the capacity by capacity of our land to produce food by 2050, bearing in mind the impacts that climate change can have. So I think in a nutshell, there are good stories that are coming out of Africa. I think my colleagues in Ghana and Kenya would probably say the same thing.
Right.
It doesn't have to be high-tech. It has to be fit for purpose. But we can also exploit those that are developed elsewhere and utilize them for context.
Okay. Yeah. And are those technologies that you mentioned, are they affordable?
Some of them are affordable. Yeah. The high-tech one will probably be expensive initially. That is why entities like ours and in collaboration with research institutions come in to ensure that we bring some of the costs down. But some of the local solutions are actually affordable.
Yeah.
And people want things that will solve their own problem. People are willing to pay. We had a conversation with the ladies, and I remember Didi yesterday saying that people are willing to pay as long as there is a solution that addresses their problem. And so that whole notion that certain solutions are way too expensive and people can't afford them, it's about how do you make sure that you come up with models that ensure that they ultimately pay for that solution over time. So that's where the other component of where innovation is required.
Okay. Max, what are some of the solutions is the UN working on right now?
Good, thank you. Yeah. So I think that Africa can do it to begin with. I think that we need to rediscover our ability to care. And you people in here are testimony that you actually care. And once we have the care and the kindness, we can do it for ourselves. Now, the situation we are finding is somehow, ridiculous in many sense, that the majority of smallholder farmers are not able to produce food for themselves and for us. Yet we can do it. The country where I come from used to be called the breadbasket of Africa. And that didn't happen by accident. It happened because of systematic and sustained investments in research and development that empowered smallholder farmers to produce the food that they produced. We are the country that put on the market SR52, which Southern Rhodesia 52, which was the first single cross hybrid that we exported even to America because the yields were higher than US corn, and has become the parent for many other hybrids. So if we look at seed, that's very important. We look at the way we're using water efficiency. Cape Town is another one as well, water use efficiency, and that has to change. If you look at a country like Israel, which is basically a desert, I find it absurd that Israel produces several times more food than many of our countries which receive a lot of rain. So there's got to be something to do there. If you look at the way we are putting data into the people of the farmers who are producing, we need to be radical. We need to change the way we are doing it, and we've got the capability to do it. There are many other aspects that provide us with breakthroughs and accelerators that we can look at. Now, my interest, of course, is in wildlife and forests. But why am I talking about agriculture? It's because we've realized that in the quest to expand the frontiers of our food production, and given an underperforming agriculture, farmers are being forced to start expanding their farms into agriculture and wildlife territory, with often tragic consequences.
Okay.
And
yeah, you can go.
Yeah, that's basically where we come in as World Agroforestry Center, bringing back trees on agricultural land, for example, for improved soil fertility and stuff like that.
Yeah. I like the fact that you mentioned Israel in your example. I've spent time also studying technologies and going to different parts of Israel where they're using technology. I mean, Israel is the size of Kruger National Park, and half of it is desert, yet they are exporting food everywhere in the world. But when you look at some of the technology that they're using, it's not really affordable to an ordinary farmer, especially to young people that are in deep rural areas that are trying to get into agriculture. I mean, one of the ways, I think technology is using to reduce water wastage is through drip irrigation system. However, that's also not cheap. So instead of people, watering, with flood irrigation, some people are going towards using drip irrigation. So how do we sort of save water at the same time, but at the same time make these technologies, available to ordinary people? That's for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying, for example, water use efficiency is very important, and there are a number of technologies that we can use. For example, when we look at agroforestry, which I was talking about, there is the water, for example, nutrient cycling, which can be improved because, for example, if you have land which is not covered, for example, what we have in the Sahel, if we look at the water system, rainfall falling in the Sahel, for example, it's coming from East Africa, and this is through transpiration. So if there is no vegetation cover, for example, in the eastern part, then the western areas are affected. So there is more use efficiency, and also creating the systems which provide the water.
Indeed. We're going to open the questions to the floor now. Anyone has a question to any of our panelists?
Hi, my name's Sarah Masiwa. I'm here today with the High Life Foundation. And from my experience in the philanthropic space, there's those of you who are working for environmental protection, like the panelists, and those of us who aren't. But I think that sometimes our solutions to our problems can create problems for you that you have to deal with in 10, 20 years for the environment. So my question is, what are your recommendations for those of us who are in the philanthropic space and don't necessarily want to be in environmental protection, but want our solutions to be on track with the work that you're doing and to be adapting the technology that you're discovering as you're doing it?
So a couple of years ago, the UN did something about the Great Green Wall, and no one's hearing anything about it again. So can you tell us what happened, and if it's still on, and how that's impacting your work?
Yeah.
Hi, my question is directed to Max. So I'm following up on the lunchtime conversation that we had. Looking at the trajectory of population growth in Africa, do you think that the technologies that we have used in the past can be able to produce enough food without impacting the environment, because we have to feed millions and millions of mouths over the next 50 to 100 years? And those technologies that we had were quite different because the numbers of mouths we needed to feed were quite small. So how do we balance adapting technologies that are scalable to feed potentially 1 billion mouths with potential devastating effects on the environment?
Okay. I'll let Tabile answer the first question.
Okay. So to answer the first question, there's a lot that philanthropists can do to support climate change initiatives. And I think the first thing to note is that climate change is not just for environmentalists or tree huggers. It affects all of us. The example of drought in Cape Town in the past year affected everybody, and everyone had to do something. So that's one on the one hand. The other issue is that there are economic opportunities that climate change brings to us and to countries and the continent. Some of these startups that we are supporting have come up with solutions, and they've been able to create a lot of jobs, some of which are meeting the SDGs that were discussed in the previous panel. So philanthropy can help us by making sure that we have a skilled workforce, people that work in these spaces. We need a lot more people that understand solar energy systems. We need people that understand the water and sanitation, people that study designs around small systems, sanitation systems, or water-efficient systems. So, and those solutions would create jobs. So it's the skilling around that, but also investing in programs that support entities or initiatives that work in the adaptation and mitigation space. So because you might think you are not affected, yes, indeed, some of the things that we do now can have an impact in the future. But you can do something now. You can use water efficiently as much as you can. You can be mindful of how you manage your waste, as an example. You can be mindful of how you use your energy. If you don't have to install a solar system, but you can definitely change your lighting system, right? That will cut your costs. You can have alternative ways of heating your water. So I think all I'm saying is that we need skills in this space. And the second issue is entities like ours who have developed models for supporting climate change solutions, proven models that have attracted additional funding from elsewhere would really support our drive to ensure that we are as climate proof as possible. But I think my colleagues can add to that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Just on the green belt, cover is very important. When you're out and it's cold, you feel colder than when you are inside. So the same with the green belt that you're talking about. It came about because we had no cover in that area. There was no cover, and droughts were recurrent. Farmers were not getting anything. So poverty definitely would be the order of the day. But what has happened is just through natural regeneration, some efforts with replanting of the trees. This has actually increased cover in the Sahel. And most of the trees which are there, for example, are just simplified debut trees which improve soil fertility, cooling of the ground, water and nutrient cycling, and more. Like, for example, trees act like funnels. Rainfall falls, and then they spread the water on the crops. So this has actually resulted in farmers' yields, for example, just increasing by regreening that area.
Okay.
Yes. So, yes, I'll make a comment first about the first question, which I found also very, very interesting.
Sorry,
how can we...
Can we have 5 minutes as well?
Are we done already?
Okay. How can we help those who care about the environment but are working in a different sector to make sure that the outcomes of their actions don't have a negative impact on the environment? I think that's the situation most of us find ourselves in. And what we're doing is, at the moment, we are working on how we can change the incentives in our economic system that are leading well-meaning people, well-meaning companies to do things that have a net negative impact on the environment. So you see that in many countries in Africa, they're going for coal-fired power stations because it happens to be what is seemingly cheaper technology. Yeah? What can we do? Yet we know that that technology is actually resulting in bad climate outcomes. That's the same thing that's happening even at an individual level. We are making choices that are contrary to what we believe to be the right thing to do. And President Obama talked about it last week when when he was here addressing, when he said, look, you find many well-meaning CEOs who hire an army of lawyers to help them to understand how they can dodge tax. Yet that tax would help that person who is in that locality. Now, change that. We can discuss some of the solutions that we are coming up with. In terms of technology, I think that's an important question. The technologies that we're talking about here to improve productivity of agriculture are not actually things that are, technologies for the future. These are things that we have right now. If you look at the seed technology and what we're doing with livestock and what we're doing with water, what we're doing with fertilizer, what we're doing, those are things that are denied to those people who are most vulnerable in our society. Now, you're absolutely right that some technology needs to be looked at carefully. That's why in the morning when people talked about the importance of regulation, I couldn't make that point much stronger because regulation is very potentially dangerous technology. If you think about it in one way, we are creating new organisms, new forms of life that on the one hand can help us solve our food problem. But on the other hand, when we release them into the atmosphere, we don't know what will happen. Yeah? Some people are using the same technology to start creating military weapons and all those things that governments in Africa should care about and should worry about. And where we are falling behind is that our regulatory systems are not fit for purpose at the moment for most African countries.
No, thank you. No, thank you so much to my panelists. And what we've learned today is whether we like it or not, climate change affects all of us. It affects the development of Africa. And I think it's up to us as philanthropists to put resources together into innovative methods that would change the situation in Africa and move Africa forward. Thank you very much.
Well done. Wasn't ours short?
And I have the privilege of introducing our next moderator for the fireside chat.
Oh, yes, please. Oh, yes, please.
Hello, I think we're ready to start the next panel. So I'll just give us a couple of seconds to settle down. Thank you. Well, I have the privilege and honor of moderating what I think is one of the more exciting panels of this particular conference. It is a panel with a low average age, so I think that's a nice addition as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first panelist. So Tendai is a rugby player, and he plays for the South African national team and for the Sharks. He is famously known as the Beast. Yes? So Tendai made his debut in rugby in Hold on. He made his debut in rugby in 2008 with a test match against Wales. Just 1 week later, he already received the award for being the man of the match. He is the most capped prop in South Africa, and more recently, he has become the first Black African to earn his 100th test cap. It is also his birthday today, so please welcome Tendai. Birthday, dear to you. Happy birthday, dear Tendai. Yes, day to you. So for our second panelist, coming from a modest background in a sport that until 1992 had been dominated by South Africa's minority, Sia is an inspiration to many South Africans. Through partnerships with some of the corporates such as Land Rover and Adidas, he's enabled young South Africans from disadvantaged backgrounds to really have a fair chance in life and achieve their dream. He is, which I'm expecting a round of applause, the first Black captain for the South African Springboks. Please welcome Sia. So welcome to the stage, and thank you so much for taking time out of practice to join us today. So you both have these incredibly modest backgrounds, and you're both successful in your own right in your sport. And your stories have really inspired a lot of young people across Africa. So I'll start with you, Sia. Can you share a little bit about your story and what motivates you today?
Hello, everybody. I'm a bit nervous, but I'll make sure I speak loud and clear. I'm Siamtana Kolisi. I was born in Zweden, in the Eastern Cape, in Port Elizabeth, and I was raised by my grandmother. And yeah, as you know, my background wasn't the strongest or the best, but I think it was the best in a way that we didn't have a lot, but I got love and support from my grandmother. She did everything she could to make sure that my well-being was good. And yeah, there was a lot of struggles, you know. Obviously, my grandmother didn't work. My dad wasn't around at the time. So I didn't really have like a father figure in my life. So all I had was my grandmother and my aunts at times. And going to bed, you know, your dreams, all you think about is like, am I going to get a meal tomorrow? And I was excited to go to school because in each township school, some of us don't get food at home for breakfast or lunch or dinner. So they give like a slice of bread and peanut butter and like powdered milk, and that will keep me up all day long. So I used to be excited to go to school, and I made sure I worked hard. So with my academics were good because I had a full belly, and I played rugby as well. So that one meal will keep me up, will keep me going from the morning all the way to the evening, you know. And sometimes I get home, I would know, no, I won't get food. So you just get sugar water, and you take it down, and the grandmother says, you'll be fine. By the time you wake up, it'll be school already. And so that kept me going. So yeah, and I love rugby. My family played rugby. My dad played rugby. And so it was kind of natural for me. I started with soccer. I couldn't kick the ball straight, so I was like, okay, cool. In rugby, you don't need too much skill. All you need is heart, you know, and give everything you can. So played rugby, and that was kind of my way out. That's where I met my teacher, whose name is Eric Songwiti, who spotted me when we played against another township school called Msengeni. We lost the game 50-0, and then he came to me after the game. He came to me after the game. He said, I see some potential in you. I'm like, after we just lost 50-0. Yeah, and then it took me to my first provincial trials, and then I got my scholarship to go to Grey. And yeah, when I got to Grey, obviously, you start dreaming differently, you know, the environment you're in, you've got the equipment, you've got the teachers, and all you hear is positive things around you. So that kind of made me see life differently, you know. All of a sudden, I wanted to be a doctor, but yeah, maths and
massive privilege to be here, and we just honored me and Sia. Thanks for having us. And yeah, just my story. You know, I was born and bred in Zimbabwe, and pretty much as a young boy, I was quite chubby and bigger than the rest. Used to push everybody about in primary school and give my mama a lot of headaches because she thought I was going to become, you know, this trouble child because I was quite aggressive as a youngster. And you know, I was very fortunate to have quite a strong family. My mom and dad, you know, they looked after us, me and my siblings, really well. And you know, we went to good schools. And yeah, back then I was also a soccer player like Sia when I was in my in my childhood. I used to love soccer. I used to be a Manchester fan, and I used to see myself playing for Manchester United. In the future, but it never worked out because I was horrible at soccer. So we were fortunate in our school, in our primary school, rugby got introduced, and I managed to find myself there, and I fell in love with the game, and I think it was the perfect way to channel my aggression and use my strength, you know, my God-given ability. And just, you know, rugby in Zimbabwe, it's really great at schoolboy level. So I had a dream to pursue a career in the sport because I really found out quite early that I was really good at it. And a lot of people came alongside me to help me. You know, I had some great mentors in my life. And I went to Peter House in Zim, and it was there where I met a guy called Paul Davis. And he really saw the talent in me, and you know, he told me that I could become somebody really great. You know, I could really achieve something special in the game, and I just had to focus. Just had to really, calm down and not be too wild, and you know, just want to have fun as a youngster. I really had to just be focused and just really know which path I want to take. So he was the first guy that really came alongside me to help me. And then from there, you know, we were fortunate enough to come play in the Craven Week in South Africa. And it was there where I was noticed by the Sharks scouts. And they invited me to be a part of the Sharks Academy. And I was just overwhelmed. It was a dream come true. You know, here's a young Zimbabwean boy that was dreamt of becoming a professional, you know, rugby player, and now the opportunity it finally come. And yeah, I remember I couldn't sleep for a couple of days, and I was so excited. And I couldn't wait for school to finish. Got on the bus, took about a 24-hour trip from Harare to Durban on a, just excited, with my satchel with 2,000 Rand in my pocket and my boots. And that was all I had. And I arrived in Durban, and I was just ready for anything, for any challenges. And and then everything just started falling into place. I got into a club, and then joined the academy, and then I started applying my trade. And I really was hungry to be noticed, because as a Zimbabwean kid, nobody knew who I was.
Yeah.
So I had to really prove myself. And I got a mentor, Jeremy Thompson. He was an ex-Sharks player and Springbok as well. So he came alongside me, made him at church, and he really taught me some life skills that I needed at that stage as a young man. And he really is still with me now to this day, and he helps me out with a whole lot of stuff. He's my manager and mentor. So he's been a great friend of mine. So he came alongside me and has helped me all along my career. And it's been 14 years in Durban now, and
You're a Durbanite now.
I'm a Durbanite, but Zimbabwe at heart always. Always.
That's amazing. I think what's interesting about both of you is you both remember the names of the people that played such a huge role in making you who you are today. And I think for a lot of the philanthropists in the room, I think this is when you really get to see that the work that you put in and the funding that you give, that it means something to somebody. And I wanted to ask, so there are a lot of people in the room who fund organizations that look for young people or give young people an opportunity. And somebody noticed you. So what are some of the things that you would say to people like that may be sitting in the room?
No, obviously encourage them to really go out there, and help, the next young beast, the next young kid who's got a dream to achieve something special in what they're doing. So, your work it doesn't go unseen. It's incredible, and it inspires us all. So, now I think, for myself, I've got a dream to create my own sports academy in Zimbabwe. So I'm certainly going to be looking for partners and mixing and mingling with some people in the room here, so I can share my ideas, because your backing it really goes a long way.
And Sia, you went back and helped other children. It didn't just stop with you. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that you do in communities and why you do it? Like what motivates you to go back all the time and give back?
Actually, when I started playing rugby, I started in a club called African Bombers. And then I played at Msengeni, that's where the teacher, Eric Songwiki, scouted me. And when I was in the school, Msengeni, we used to play, we had 3 different teams, and we all played with the same jersey. So you, under 11, under 9s would play, take it off and give it to the under 11s, then take it off, give it to the under 15s, And, you can imagine how much sweat and all of that, that the last team is playing with, And my club as well, we didn't have a lot of equipment, there was not a lot of motivation. So if someone came and brought a new rugby ball, I would be so excited to go to training. I would tell a couple of my friends, bring more guys, because life in the township was very hard, There wasn't a lot of things you could do. It was either you go with the people that are not doing things that you're not supposed to be doing, or you go the sport route, So, and it took something so small for us to be motivated and keen to go to training, like a T-shirt, or a new T-shirt, or a cone, or a new water bottle. That got me so excited, and I would tell all my friends they want to come to training and come and see. And I told myself from that age, I couldn't really dream of making it because my circumstances didn't allow it. But I had such good people around me who believed in me and supported me. I told myself, you know what, if I ever get the opportunity, I'll make a difference in my community. And the first time, with my first salary, obviously I went back to my school. I bought them rugby jerseys for each team. I buy them tracksuits, and it's tough because I want to do it all the time, but it has to come out of my own pocket, because before that, the sponsors weren't there yet and they didn't understand what I was trying to do and what it meant to me, And now Adidas, I went to Germany to visit Adidas there, and my sponsor, Land Rover as well, they kind of see what I want, and I want to be associated with people who believe in my drive and what motivates me, because I play rugby so I can help others. I believe I'm put in here in this place to give back to other people and help other people. And nothing is sweeter than you making it and helping a couple of people with you. And I know the next person will also help the other. So it's a whole process. And my long life dream is to, instead of me, guys like me, like being good at rugby, getting taken out of the township and putting this school, and you're taking the best out of the township and taking them somewhere else. How about keeping them there and getting the equipment, the right teachers, the right people in there? Then these kids start competing against the schools that we get taken to, the grades, you know. And that's my goal one day, which I wish would happen. But at the moment now, we want to start a rugby tournament and give the best kids there the opportunity to go to an English school, you know. And the most important thing for me is education, because in the township, you know, I was the third smartest in my grade. And then I went to grade. I was struggling to pass the term because the language barrier was so tough, you know. And that's one thing that we forget. We think we're just sportsmen. And the more I'm growing, you know, like a guy like Maps who's here, who shows me he's not only doing one thing, there's so many other things you do. And guys like that motivate me. And for me as a sportsman, I want to motivate other sportsmen to know that we are so much more than this. And this platform is not only given to us just to play rugby. There's so much more in us. And that's my thing, and that's what I want to leave behind, not winning all the trophies and being named the best player. I want to leave behind a legacy that's bigger than that's going to continue, you know, in future when my kids one day look up and say, you know what, my dad left that school and he's helped so many people. So that's what I want to do one day. Thank you.
That's amazing, Sia. I think that's also the unique position that you're both in, right?
Yeah.
You're able to be role models and to really change the face of communities just by who you are. And I know you, Beast, you're a Goodwill ambassador for the High Life Foundation. And the students just love seeing you coming to different communities and are so inspired by who you've become. Just to pivot a little bit, so one of the unique things about philanthropy is that it brings families together. So I know, you know, for our family in particular, there was actually one incident where my dad, who's a businessman, Strive Masiwa, read a study about how eggs can prevent stunting. And so he came home and we sat there from 9 p.m. until 3 in the morning, where he was designing how he was going to try and give every child in Zimbabwe an egg to prevent stunting. And I've had the pleasure of meeting both your wives, who work on really interesting projects. So can you talk a little bit about it and what you thought when your wives came home and said, I want to do this project? Do you want to go first?
Yep. I think now my wife, Kazira, she's sitting right there. I can tell you for a fact that, you know, she's the biggest driving force in our family when it comes to giving back, and you know, she actually inspires me. You know, she challenges me, because I think sometimes in our careers, you know, we get caught up, you know, in the busyness of life and traveling all around the world and just playing the game. But we forget, you know, the most important thing, you know, like Sia was saying, is to give back. Actually, you know, forget about the winning, forget about, you know, the trophies. The most important thing is actually to impact the next generation and help the less fortunate. So I think, you know, she's always been, you know, my challenging force, and just always, you know, telling me to get out there and do stuff. And she's got her own foundation now. It's called UMBA. And in Shona, UMBA means to build. So, you know, she wants to build a better Africa by helping, you know, the young girls and boys just to have the basic needs, the basic needs they have to have for them to study and obviously learn and get through school. And it's something she's really passionate about. And yeah, so she's always teaching our kids as well to, you know, to become a part of that, you know, for them to learn from a young age. And I think I've got two little kids, a girl, Talumba, and boy, Wangu. And yeah, they're so young, and they learn this thing from a young age. So I think she's always just being that shining light. And you know, for me, just to draw inspiration from her is a big thing. And so I just want to give her, you know, all the thanks.
Yo!
And, yeah, because She deserves it.
And
Yeah.
thank you, Ku, for the role that you played. And to see her, I always see your wife with her rallying everybody to donate and doing these interesting things. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, no, I really love it. Like, I support her fully because, you know, we are, she knows how I am and where I've been, where I come from, you know, and she loves it and she loves that about me. And she says one thing she loves the most about me is that I love giving so much because obviously being born in the township, you have to, sometimes your survival kind of relies on other people who are around you as well, you know. And she's also now started to give, you know, she uses the social media, you know, because we don't have people that kind of backs everything we do. So the school needed a library, you know, and she went on a social media. She started asking people who can donate books, and a lot of people replied, and she built a whole new library for the school, you know, and it's just a small thing like that. To her, or to us, it's a small thing. But those kids have a library that they never had before, you know, and now she's getting different requests. And she does it for free. She doesn't do it for anything. She just enjoys doing it because she knows how much it means to me. And as B said, we want our kids to grow up around that we want them to see, and we take them. She takes the kids there when they're painting and everything so that they can see that this is the way of living. This is what life is about, you know. And it's a huge thing, and we really love it when our wives get involved. And there's nothing more important than us supporting them in what they want to do, because at the end of the day, they are the rocks of our family, because they are, I mean, with the families the whole time while we're traveling and stuff. So for us to do our little bit by supporting what they do actually means a lot to them, and it shows that we also care.
So we are going to give 2 people or 3 people the opportunity, we have time for more, the opportunity to ask some questions. So I'm sure you see these guys on the screen, and I'm sure you wonder some stuff, even if it's a rugby question. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and they'll find you with the mic. So we'll take 2 questions, and then they'll answer. So we have another one here. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Will Smith. It really is. It really is. I run this is special for me because I run the Monrovia Football Academy, which is in Liberia. It's a sport academy that combines high quality education with professional football, soccer training. And I've had the pleasure of meeting these guys just a few minutes ago. And I wanted to ask a question that might speak to some of the philanthropists in the room about the experience that you guys have had, and not just you, but those who have been around you growing up. You've already spoken to the way that rugby has transformed your own lives. But what about those who had similar experiences growing up? Rugby gave them an opportunity, and then maybe they didn't make it to the professional level. Can you speak a little bit to those whom you know who grew up in that sort of situation, and then because of the opportunities that rugby gave them, they've gone on and had success in something other than rugby, perhaps?
Okay, let's start with that one, then we'll go to the next one.
Okay. I'll probably say, you know, I think most of my mates that I played rugby with, that chose a different part to me, you know, learned certain life skills from rugby that have actually carried them to where they are today. And I think the first one that comes to mind is teamwork. And I think getting to be part of a team teaches you so much. You know, you learn to not to be selfish. You know, you learn to put the team first, and you know, you learn to, you know, play your part. So I think, you know, that has been a big thing for them going into the corporate world, whether work in hospitals or, you know, just being entrepreneurs in their own right. You know, that has just prepared them all, and as well just, you know, the hard work and dedication you need to be, you know, to be a sports person, a rugby player. You know, the amount of hours you have to put on the field and in the gym, and all that stuff was really, like, you know, just giving them a high work ethic. You know, so I think
discipline.
Yeah, discipline, all that stuff. You know, so it's really helped them to propel them in different careers. Just having those life skills has been immense for them. So I can testify to many of my mates that are doctors, you know, chartered accountants. You know, they've really excelled.
And you, Sia?
Yeah, I actually there were 3 of us that got a scholarship at my school, and I think I was the worst rugby player out of all of them 3. And obviously, all of us went through the years at school at Grey, and then, some kind of fell off the radar. We all played first team and stuff, and the one guy just didn't make it, He wasn't growing or meeting the requirements of what was needed of a rugby player. And he actually got a bursary through rugby. And he went to go study at university, and now he's got his degree and everything, And, in a kind of way, rugby can help you in so many ways as well, because you might get the opportunity, and if you want to study this, it's always available for people, when they give you an offer to go study. And like I think Beast hit the nail on the head there. All the stuff that I've learned on the rugby field, I also take it through life as well, And it helps with so much, especially if you've grown up by yourself and you start playing a team sport, or if you play an individual sport and you move into a team. It's totally different when it's not only about you, when you put other people before you and stuff, it gives you so much more motivation, I think. And I think that's what drives me as well, I'm playing a team sport, and I always know with all the help that I want to do, if I don't perform on the field, if I don't make sure I wake up at 5 o'clock when I have to wake up and go train, the people that I'm supporting are going to suffer because I won't be able to perform at the top of my level. So those kind of things, that's what I use, Some people will see that you're putting too much pressure on yourself, but it keeps me going, It fuels me to know that there's a lot more other people that I can't give up now. There's so much more I can do, and it's never enough as well, So, yeah, I think rugby or any sport actually helps in so many ways.
Great. Another question? Can we get a mic here? And then we'll take that one. We'll end with that one.
Hi guys, my name is not Will Smith. Hey Will. My name is Maps Maponyane, and I just wanted to ask, so sort of speaking to Will's point really, with regards to the opportunities that you've gotten. So if you didn't get those opportunities, if you didn't get spotted, if you didn't get the guidance that you did, where do you think you would have been now? I don't know, Tendai, maybe you would have been a neurologist, Sia, maths professor of sort, or architect. Where do you think you would have been now, and what does that really tell you about the opportunities you've gotten and what still needs to be done so that more people can have the happy ending that you've had in your lives?
Yeah, sure. To be honest, I really don't know where I would be, It didn't look too good for me. Like, as much as I wasn't interested in everything else that was happening, all I wanted to do was obviously to be a rugby player. I spent all my time at training at school, but my future didn't look too good, especially with my friends. They were falling one by one, getting stuck into the wrong things. To be honest, I'm actually, it scares me every time I think about it. If I didn't get this opportunity, what would have happened to me? And what kind of, like all these changes that I want to make, like who would have done it for my community, So we've got a long way to go to be quite honest. And like that's why I say I feel strongly about us keeping kids in the township, so we can show the other kids that this can be done, this is possible, And instead of them looking up to me when I'm at the other school, I'm only come back to the township when I'm wearing my uniform with my blazer, and getting dropped off. Where I can be in the township every single day. I know it'll be tough, and I believe in the township, as soon as you get something started like the school, or you give more stuff, and you get the community involved and tell them this is for you, this is for your children, They will support us and get them behind you. And there will be so many more kids who will think differently, Like my kind of thought, my heroes at that time were people who were selling drugs around the corner, people selling alcohol. I wanted to sell alcohol. Or taxi driver, that's what you set your standard at, and it's scary. And I would love for anything that we get more people supporting the township and pushing there so that the kids can dream about bigger stuff. Because when I walked to Grey and I got there and I'm like, I got my own bed, I got socks because I didn't have in the township, I got socks, and I was so happy about it, but the other kids didn't understand. And it was so deep for me to have those things, and those bedtimes and all that kind of stuff. And the teacher tells me, you can be whatever you want. You can do this. Here, if you want to be a woodwork, you want to do something woodwork, here's the equipment and all that kind of stuff. In the township, you've only got such limited, and your vision and your goals is only limited to this. So in answering your question, we have a long way to go. And I'm scared. I wonder what the kids are thinking now, what they want to be. Because I know all the stuff that I wanted to be wasn't good. And it's not even close to what I wanted to be today.
Now, I think for me, MAPS, actually growing up in Zimbabwe, education is really important. So, my dad always used to be on our cases to make sure that, we get good grades. So I think if I hadn't gone the rugby route, I would have probably ended up as a chartered accountant, because I was pretty bright at school, believe it or not. I got an A in mathematics, A-level maths, so I was quite bright. So that would have been my fallback. So I think from your question, I think it's really important to promote education, because not everybody gets picked. There's only a certain number of spots on a team. So not everybody that's wanting to get there will get there. So you have to have the perfect balance. Education is vital. And I've, my work with High Life now has really opened my eyes. It's been just incredible. Just the work that they do. For young people in Zimbabwe. They're raising young African leaders through education. And for me, it's vital, to drive that, because yes, sports is great. It's great to be a rugby player now. It's great to achieve the highest level. But the fact of the matter is that it doesn't happen to everybody. So you have to make sure that you study hard. You really work hard. And for me, every time when I get a chance to mentor young kids, that's one of my biggest driving points. Achieve the perfect balance. Make sure you get good grades. And then if you make it in sports, you make it. If you don't, then
it's okay.
You always got education to fall back on.
I think that echoes what Judy Zamini said this morning. She said when she grew up, she was always told that education was going to be the key and the power that was going to take her out of poverty. So we have space for our last question, which is in the back.
Hi, my name is Moses. So my question is, what's your drive? Like, what keeps you motivated and what keeps you going when you play rugby, as well as what's the heart and what's your drive to wanting to start this sports or this rugby academy?
So I guess that's to you, Tendai. Why are you starting your rugby academy?
Jeez, I think, thanks, Moses, great question. For myself, it's to leave a legacy. I think Sia, hit the nail on the head there, saying that, it's more than just about our careers. It's more than just, being capped 100 times for the Springboks and having all these accolades behind my name. It's about what I can do for the next generation, for the next, young people that really want to make it. So I can tell you, when I was in Zimbabwe as a young man, I had a dream to become a professional sportsman, professional rugby player. But in Zimbabwe, there was no professional setup. There was nowhere where I could go and really get the right tools I needed. So I want to provide that in Zimbabwe. I want to create something that has never been seen. State-of-the-art academy that that provides young athletes the right tools and fundamentals they need to be successful. So that is a big driving force for me, because I know that there's a lot of talent. I go back to Zimbabwe a lot, and I get to sit down and watch a rugby match, St. George's against Peterhouse or Peterhouse against Prince Edward, and I just see there's so much potential. It's scary, but it's not nurtured properly. So I want to become a part of that, and I've even spoken to Kirsty as well. Kirsty Coventry, she's around the corner there.
Kirsty Coventry, the Olympian, is here.
Yeah, and she's a great friend of mine, and I've learned a hell of a lot from what she's doing in Zim. She's passionate, and she's really working towards something there. So I'm looking to also partner up with her so we can do something great. We can team up, because we have made it in our own right, but now it's time to create something in Zim that that will help the next young person that wants to make it. And it's not just about rugby, it's athletics, it's basketball, and cricket and soccer. It's working with all those young kids, teaching them life skills, and I promise you that will be something that will be long-lasting, way past my playing days. So that is definitely my biggest driving force.
That's awesome. It's great to hear that you're trying to build a legacy and you have dreamt once and it got you here. So I'm pretty sure and looking forward to seeing the academy. But I just want to say a huge thank you to you both. I think you're both extremely incredible, but I also just want to say, especially to you, Sia, thanks for showing young Black South Africans that they can do it. And I think that the moment when we all heard that you were the first captain, the first Black captain, we were all extremely excited, and I think it came in the perfect year, celebrating Mandela's 100. But thank you so much to both of you, and if we can please give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Cool.
So one of the things about African philanthropy that we've spoken about, I can remember since the beginning of the African Philanthropy Forum, is how we wanted to see more literature, how we wanted to see more research about where philanthropists are in Africa, what they're doing, and where they're going. And today, we've got a next thing that is really exciting planned. It is the book launch of the book African Philanthropy, Evolution, Practice, and Change. And it's an amazing publication that is going to be made available to everyone who's here today. And I think it's a great start to us being able to curate our own stories that define African philanthropy and where we're going. So if you can please make your way to the foyer after this session. But thank you for listening to us today.
Thank you very much, Tanya Masiwa, founder of Simba Foundation, and riveting stuff from both these men. I think I still have some hairs standing at the back of my neck from their stories. But for now, like Tanya mentioned, we have the book launch at the Center Court, which is where you guys had the speed networking session earlier on today. So if you can all please quickly make our way that side, because the local staff will be setting up for dinner, which will be later on. And could I kindly ask that everyone please take their belongings with them. Just make sure that your phone is there, your laptop is there, your handbags, and of course your notes. I saw some people writing some notes down. What's the point of scribbling notes if you're not going to take them with?
Mama. Yo salí